We are in Glasgow today to begin the consultation process on the second phase of SNAP, Scotland's National Action Plan for Human Rights. Since July 2018, a development working group of people from across civil society and the public sector has been working to develop SNAP 2. This group has now produced this document for your views and support. It details issues and actions that have been identified across 25 key themes. You can find out more about the consultation process and share your views at www.snaprights.info/snap-2.
Perfect.
Hi everybody, my name's Emma. I'm the Communications and Participation Manager with the Scottish Human Rights Commission. I've been doing that job for about 5.5 years, and I've been quite heavily involved in both the first cycle of Scotland's National Action Plan for Human Rights and in all of the work that's been taking place to develop the second cycle of Scotland's National Action Plan. So, I just wanted to say just a few words about what National Action Plans for Human Rights are and what they're meant to be. Talk to you a little bit just about what the first SNAP looked like, and give just a very few examples of what SNAP did in its first 4 years. So, what's National Action Plan for Human Rights? It's a plan, that's the first thing. And it's really a plan, or it should be a plan for making human rights real in people's lives. So it's something that's recommended by the United Nations that all countries should have, to take all of the rights that we have in treaties, declarations, conventions on human rights, and set out the steps that the country is going to take to make those rights a reality in people's lives. So that's what it is. It's a United Nations recommendation and it's a plan. The United Nations has also provided some guidance for countries about what National Action Plans for Human Rights should look like and what they should be like, and that's based on their sort of review of learning and experience from a whole range of other countries that have had National Action Plans for quite some time. So there's some good examples in places like Sweden, Finland, Australia and New Zealand that we can learn from. And what the United Nations says is that a National Action Plan for Human Rights should be based on evidence, that it should be participatory, it should bring people together to talk about what the actions should be, and it should be independently monitored. There are also a whole range of other sort of good practice guidelines, and that's all set out in the booklet that you've got with you, but I won't go through them just now. So, all of that fed into the development of Scotland's first National Action Plan for Human Rights. SNAP 1, as we're calling it now, was launched in December 2013. At that time, it was the first and only National Action Plan for Human Rights in any part of the UK, and that is still the case today. So Scotland is the only part of the UK that has produced a National Action Plan for Human Rights, and we're quite proud of that. The first version of SNAP ran for 4 years until December 2017. And just to give you a bit of context about how that fitted in internationally, when it was launched, there were lots of really sort of positive comments about the fact that Scotland was taking this step, and just to read out what a couple of quite important international people said. The United Nations High Commissioner for Human Rights at the time said that national action plans can bring clarity to states in identifying the steps they must take to improve the promotion and protection of human rights, especially for the most vulnerable people, and I'm pleased to welcome the initiative taken by Scotland. And then at a European level, the former Council of Europe Commissioner for Human Rights said, to develop an action plan openly presenting problems and a process of developing practical solutions is a signal of commitment to human rights. Scotland is joining an increasing number of countries across Europe that have developed and implemented national action plans to support the full realisation of human rights in practice. So it was quite a big deal when SNAP was launched back in December 2013. So what did it actually look like? What did it actually do? So there were 5 broad areas of action under SNAP 1. We had some very broad aims around, first of all, building a better human rights culture in Scotland, improving rights in health and social care, improving the right to an adequate standard of living, improving rights in the context of justice and safety, and improving the way that Scotland took forward its international human rights obligations. We did some work to develop 7 long-term outcomes, so 7 very broad goals that we wanted to see achieved through SNAP, and that ranged from things like empowering people to know and understand their rights, holding public bodies to account for the implementation of rights, and a whole range of other things, again, which are set out in your booklet. I won't go through them in detail. Over 60 organisations from across the public sector and across the third sector were involved in developing and then implementing SNAP 1. And altogether, we think there were probably over 50 actions that were taken forward over those 4 years. I'm going to give you just a very few examples of those actions in 2 minutes, and then we're going to hear from somebody who was involved in some of those actions, and then we're going to show you a short film about one of the kind of key actions that was taken forward. Okay, so this is a photo from Perth and Kinross, where one of the actions that we took forward through SNAP 1 was really to sort of work with a local authority and a range of local partners, so police, NHS, education and so on, third sector organisations, to try a way of bringing people in the local community together with organisations that were delivering services for them to work together and come up with the local priorities for human rights in that local area. So we developed a kind of model for doing that. That model was then used in another area in Edinburgh to develop an approach to children's services, and some of what we learned from developing that model was then packaged up and shared with local authorities across Scotland. In 2015, I think it was, the Scottish Government, who were involved in SNAP, along with a range of other partners in SNAP, ran a social media campaign to try and raise awareness of how human rights are relevant to various aspects of people's everyday lives. We also did things like hold big events to explore particular human rights issues. So again, in 2015, we held a major sort of international conference in Edinburgh that brought together a range of international experts, as well as organisations working in Scotland, to look at how we could take forward the idea of putting more rights into Scotland's law. How do we incorporate economic and social rights into Scotland's law so that people can enforce them more easily? We also did things to kind of show how human rights work in practice. So NHS Health Scotland and the Health and Social Care Alliance, along with my own organisation, produced a series of 8 case study films showing how human rights work in a range of health and social care settings. So they were featuring kind of real people, real organisations using human rights in practice, and that has been used as a resource for training and building the capacity of other organisations across the health and social care sector to improve how they themselves put human rights into practice. And then the final one I'll mention, again, we did some more research in areas where we knew there was more to find out about where the gaps were in terms of people's rights. So we ran the partners in the health and social care part of SNAP ran a project to bring female refugees and asylum seekers in Glasgow together to really understand where the gaps were in terms of their access to the right to health and what could and should be done to close that gap. And then one of the other things that we did through SNAP 1 was to set up a reference group on the right to an adequate standard of living that brought together a range of people with lived experience of the issues to identify priorities for action and to get involved in taking forward some of those actions. And I'm going to stop speaking now and I'm going to ask Alex Thorburn, who is a member of that group, to talk to us about his experiences of being involved in that and SNAP more generally.
Thanks, Emma. I've been asked to speak to you about my experience of SNAP 1 and a little bit about my hopes for SNAP 2. Although SNAP began life in 2013, I didn't join until 2015 when I joined the Health and Social Care Action Group as a lived experience member. A little later on I joined the Adequate Standard of Living Reference Group, and all members of that reference group have to have direct experience of poverty and poverty-related issues. And I'm pleased to see that Lizzie is also here today from the Adequate Standard of Living Reference Group. My reason for joining 2 of those groups was that from my work supporting other disabled people, I could already tell that SNAP was having a positive influence on the human rights conversation in Scotland. And also felt that the two groups were well matched as well, because, as we all know, poverty has a direct and hugely negative impact on health. And I've learned a great deal, although I've been passionate about human rights for a long time, I've learned a great deal from both working with the SHRC and the other members within the groups. And I don't think that from my own point of view, my experience of SNAP would be quite so positive without the support of SHRC. And I know that I speak for other members of the group, from the Adequate Standard of Living Reference Group, that I single out Chloe for particular attention, because she's worked tirelessly with us and been also behind the scenes to make our input to the conversation relevant and meaningful. Many highlights in SNAP 1, and they included the contributions that we made to several government consultations and to the national care standards. However, possibly the main highlight for me of SNAP 1 was when I was asked to deliver a short presentation on behalf of the Adequate Standard of Living Reference Group to the UN Special Rapporteur for Extreme Poverty and Human Rights when he visited the UK last year. For the past year, we've been preparing for SNAP 2, and there has been prolonged and intensive work from many participants to design and develop an improvement on what we learned from our experiences with SNAP 1. As far as SNAP 2 is concerned, there are many challenges ahead, not the least of them being to ensure adequate funding to enable us to achieve the goals that we've set to improve human rights for everyone in Scotland. One issue that I feel very strongly about is that there should be much more working between work streams in SNAP 2. There was no working together, collaborating, apart from very near the end, and I think that should have happened, and I hope that's going to happen in SNAP 2. Another issue that I'm especially passionate about is that there are too many people like me on these groups. What we need to see is young people coming forward, participating, getting their voices heard, being involved and fully understanding what SNAP and human rights is all about. I think that education is the key, and as human rights belongs to everybody, that it should be part of the school curriculum, so that when they come out of school they have an understanding of their rights and their obligations and their human rights. And finally, I found my involvement in SNAP to be a hugely positive experience, and we encourage anyone who thinks that they have something to contribute to get involved. So watch for developments over the next few months. And thanks for listening to me.
Thanks, Alex. So before we move into the sort of next session, I'll hand back to Kate. We're just going to show a quick film. I'm not sure how I'm going to run over to the laptop and do this at the same time. Anyway, so one of the projects that took place through SNAP 1 was called Housing Rights in Practice. So it was a pilot project that we ran for a couple of years to basically support residents in Leith in Edinburgh to claim their right to housing, and this is their story. Okay, so I said earlier that SNAP 1 kind of formally came to an end in December 2017 after its first 4 years. So since then, and actually in the run-up to then, the Commission and other organisations involved in SNAP have been thinking about what comes next. During 2017, so during SNAP 1's last year, we invested in and supported a national participation process. That was a process that involved 8 local events around Scotland, an online survey, and then a national event in December 2017 in Glasgow. And I think some people in the room were at that event, so you'll remember being gathered in December in a starry room with lots of things on the wall again. So over 1,500 people took part in that process overall, and that really helped us to start to think about what the kind of themes and priorities for the second phase of SNAP should be. Through that process, we came up with 25 key human rights themes. I'm just looking for Kate to click on for me.
Yeah, sorry.
And the themes that you see around the walls today are those 25 themes, and they're reflected in the booklet that you have in front of you as well. So we did a huge amount of work during 2017 to kind of start the process of thinking about what SNAP 2 would look like. At the same time, and slightly following on from that, we were also having SNAP 1 independently evaluated, and again, you may have had a chance to talk about that at your tables so far, and there's some information on pages, I think 10 and 11 of your booklet about the kind of key lessons that came out of that evaluation. So for about the last 18 months, a smaller group of people, about 15 to 20 people from across the public sector and from across civil society, have been basically working together in a room or in a series of rooms, meeting every 6 weeks or so, to really sort of take all of the findings from that participation process, the findings from the evaluation, to look at a huge amount of information about the kind of latest evidence about human rights in Scotland, the latest recommendations from the United Nations on human rights in Scotland, and really sort of look at all of that through the lens of each of these 25 themes to come up with and analyse what are the kind of key human rights issues under each of these themes in Scotland today, and then to start the process of thinking about what would an action look like for SNAP, or what would a set of actions look like for SNAP 2 under each of these themes. Those of us who've been involved in that process, I think, would agree that it's been quite hard work. There's a lot of information to kind of get to grips with, but what we've come up with, I think, is a pretty solid starting point for sort of further development. So what we now have in your booklet that you have in front of you is 7 long-term outcomes that we want SNAP 2 to achieve by 2030. They're the same as the 7 long-term outcomes that we had for SNAP 1 because they haven't really changed. They're so big and so kind of ambitious that we wanted to keep those. We've organised the information that we've produced by the 25 themes that we identified through that kind of participation process in 2017. And altogether, what you have in your booklets and what's around the room is over 60 kind of draft suggestions for action for SNAP 2. That's a lot of actions, and part of what we want to do is think about where we might want to start. We can't do all of them straight away, so we want to start to think about how do we prioritise those, how do we go with the ones where there are resources available or commitment available, who can be involved in those, who needs to be involved in those, and questions like that. The other thing that we've done through our work over the last 18 months is to start to think about what a kind of model for delivering SNAP 2 should look like. And again, there's some information about that in your booklet. That thinking is still sort of in progress, but one thing that again we've learned from the experience of SNAP 1 is that we really need to kind of think quite carefully at this stage about who and how is involved in taking forward actions in delivering SNAP 2, what the kind of governance of SNAP 2 looks like, and crucially where the resources are going to come from to take forward both the individual actions and all of the kind of support that's needed to kind of keep SNAP as a whole going. And we've certainly had a bit of a conversation about that already at our table, as others may have. So yeah, that's what we've been doing so far, and I'm going to hand back to Kate now.